Thanks, Peter. As you'd expect, being at Parliament House, we've got a lot of parliamentarians here, and I'm not going to go through the whole list because I'm sure to miss someone. Just like to recognise Mayor Davies down there. I think Terry Redman is here, but also the Minister, Mr Dean Nalder, has joined us, and I'd also like to welcome the Premier as well. And we've got Leader of the Opposition. Yep. So, Mr Nalder, I'd like to give you this invoice that recognises the extra cartage costs that growers are faced with because of the closing of Tier 3. We've also got a copy here for the Premier. So I'd like you to take that and act on it.
I'll tilt it up.
Tell Mr Premier to honour his promise to remember the agriculture.
Okay, I think it's very important that we understand how we've got to the position that we're in. And I'd just like to share for those that aren't aware that Tier 3 represents less than 10% of the grain district in Western Australia. In the last 5 years, the government, there's been $280 million spent within the grain freight network. And of that $280 million, over 40% of it has been committed to the Tier 3 areas. The basis on which that allocation of funds was made is from a committee recommendation which included the WAFarmers Federation, included CBH and included local government that recommended that funding be allocated to roads instead of rail. So that is the basis. That's the basis of the investment that's been made from that committee recommendation, and the government has fulfilled that promise. Now, the government also remains committed to commercially viable lines out in the Tier 3 area. Currently, CBH and Brookfield are in arbitration, and we must let that arbitration run its course. However, we do encourage both parties to seek resolution as quickly as possible. We would also like to invite Dale and potentially a couple of committee members to come in and meet with the Premier today to further discuss the issues regarding Tier 3 and Great Freight Network in general. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Minister. I'd like to present you with a dog spike, which is an indication of that's what we need on Tier 3 is some repairs and maintenance. I'd like to ask Mary Ninke now to have a few words about the social side of things.
Thank you, Dale. I'm a lot shorter than everyone else. People probably know that for a couple of years we've actually been running a Facebook page alarming farming, and it's amazing. Every time the Tier 3 argument comes up, there's not one person against grain on rail. It doesn't matter what other subject you bring up, people have different points of view. Now, right across Australia, we've got over 2,000 people on this alarming farming group on Facebook. And as I said, the East Coast are looking for rail and the West Coast are supporting rail. And people on that are from the city and the country. I guess to me, I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I want my family to be safe on the road. We live on the Rollins Lake King Road, and only this year they've started to cart grain to port past our beautiful railway that goes through. We're actually Tier 1, so we're very blessed. But I fear every time we drive out our front gate or every time the school bus stops that somebody might get killed by these huge trucks. They're increasing in volume, so I just can't bear to think of those people on Tier 3. I've actually been out there on their roads and they are horrendous. I mean, you know, this impacts city people as well as country. City people travel out in the bush on a regular basis. We've got far higher road deaths in the wheat belt than any other place in Australia. Adding more trucks on the roads is killing more of our people.
Next, I'll ask Mr. Mark McGowan, Leader of the Opposition, if he...
Thanks very much, Dale, and can I acknowledge all the people who've come along today. I realise it's a very difficult time of the year and people are out working hard on their properties at the moment, so the fact you've taken the time to come in today, and I realise you're a very small proportion of the people concerned about what's going on, is terrific that you've come along, and I know you represent many hundreds, if not thousands, of other families who are concerned about what's going on. I've got a few things to say. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Fushbicklers for taking me on a tour of some of the roads in a wheat truck. And I experienced what it's like in a truck on these narrow roads around the wheat belt, and I saw how hard it is to manage the truck, and I saw how frankly dangerous it is, both for the people in the trucks and the other people on the roads. And the fact of the matter is that the wheat belt of Western Australia has the highest death toll of any roads in any state in Australia. It might be the Northern Territory has a higher death toll, but of any of the states, the wheat belt of Western Australia has more people die per head of population than any other part of the country. From memory, it's 50 people per 100,000. 50 people per 100,000. Other regions and other parts of the metropolitan area, it's 5 or 6 per 100,000 each year. 50. So what we should be doing as a state is trying to save people's lives. And by keeping trucks off the road, you save people's lives. And for a long period of time, 100 years or more, rail was always what people turned to save lives and to transport product, whether it's agricultural product, minerals or the like. The move back to trucks is a mistake. It's a mistake. And what makes me angry is a few things. One, people in the wheat belt's lives are risked. Two, people in the metropolitan areas, their lives will also be risked because there will be additional truck movements into the metropolitan area no matter what the government says. There will be. CBH is in my electorate. It's just up the street from where I live. There will be additional truck movements, despite the fact you might only be 10 or 15% of the totality of grain moved on rail. The second thing that makes me angry, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say it, is you were lied to. You were lied to. I can produce for you, in fact I can see some of them out there right now, front page advertisements before the state election last March where you were advised in big bold writing by the government that all viable, as they put it, Tier 3 rail would be kept open. Yeah. Everyone interpreted that as meaning that Tier 3 rail would be kept open. Yeah. And what's more, where has the analysis been done as to what constitutes viable Tier 3 or viable rail in the wheat belt? My view is, and has been, that there should be, the Tier 3 should have been kept open. And secondly, a parliamentary committee, of which a few of my colleagues have been on it, have examined all of these issues, and they concluded one very important point, which has impacted people in the wheat belt, and that is that the PTA had a secret agreement for profit sharing in relation to rail, which has meant that it was always known when those promises were made that the likelihood was that Tier 3 would be closed. So prior to the election you were told one thing, whilst in reality there was a secret agreement that was hidden but for the actions of that committee in which it indicated there was an advantage to the PTA to close that rail. So the duplicity and the misleading has gone on. It went on before the state election. I think the people of the wheat belt, in particular the people who live along and use Tier 3 rail and the communities along that Tier 3 rail were treated appallingly, and the government has a lot of explaining and I think apologising to do to people. I'm pleased to see you're out there still pursuing this campaign. I'm pleased to see that you're getting listened to by ministers in the government, and we intend to continue to take these issues up because, frankly, people's lives are being put at risk, and that's not good enough. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. McGowan. Now, as you heard, the Minister and Premier invited 3 or 4 of us to go in and talk to him, and we're going to have to do that pretty soon, or almost straight away, in fact, because Parliament is sitting today. So I'd ask Sam Wainwright to come up, and then Terry Redman, if you could have a few words, and I might vanish as well.
Thanks very much, Dale. Look, I bring greetings on behalf of the City of Fremantle and Fremantle Road to Rail Group. We've been proud to support this campaign right from the beginning, and I should thank our Shadow Transport Minister, I'm not sure if he's still around the corner there, for introducing us. How many years ago was it now? I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and bringing together what at first glance might be a bit of an unlikely alliance between people in Fremantle and farmers out in the wheat belt. And I want to pay particular respect to the work of Jane and the rest of the crew in the Wheat Belt Rail Retention Alliance, because this is an issue which the government had been hoping would have gone away by now and died out and people would have given up. And people have done precisely the opposite. They've pushed on, and they've been vindicated. They've been proven right. They've been proven right by the fact that CBH, as most of you know, has made a go of running trains on the Tier 3 network, has demonstrated that the Tier 3 network is still commercially viable. And that's the interesting thing. For Brookfield, it's not that the Tier 3 lines aren't commercially viable, but that they can make even greater profits by closing them down and forcing the farmer to pay the cost of trucking the wheat to the bulk loading facilities on the Tier 2 and Tier 1. It's not that the Tier 3 is not viable, it is viable. CBH has demonstrated that. Viable for who? That's the question. It's more viable for Brookfield to close it down. But the question is, what's more viable? What's actually in the long-term interest of the people of Western Australia? That's the question that needs to be asked. And there's been an attempt, I would say by the government to try and deflect this and say, oh, this is just a commercial spat between CBH and Brookfield. We don't want to get involved. It's not us and all that sort of stuff. But let's think about this. It's not primarily about the commercial dispute between CBH and Brookfield. It's about looking at the true costs of closing the Tier 3 lines, the true cost of forcing an extra 70,000 truck movements per year onto the roads. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 15%, an extra 70,000 truck movements per year onto our roads. And what is the true cost of that? In road accident trauma, in diesel particulate pollutions, in greenhouse gases, in wear and tear on our roads, on loss of amenity in communities with more trucks rumbling through them. If you're to do a true cost-benefit ratio analysis, include all those things in, then it becomes abundantly clear that the Tier 3 line should remain open. And in fact, if CBH were able to do what they've talked about, and that is not just take the grain to port, but actually use the rail lines to backhaul fertiliser and fuel as well, then the multiplier benefits of keeping those railway lines running is even greater. That's why it's a strategic question of, this is an asset which belongs to the people of Western Australia, that was built up by the taxpayers and farmers of Western Australia for over a century. It's a strategic question about transport planning for the state of Western Australia. It's not a commercial spat. That's a totally wrong way to look at it. This campaign, for all the reasons you understand perfectly well, needs to succeed. We'll make it succeed. Certainly the City of Fremantle is proud to be the first Metropolitan Council to have joined the Wheat Belt Rail Retention Alliance. We'll continue to support it, and we'll see you at the next event. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sam. We're going to have to go because the Minister has got a meeting in an hour, but I'll ask Terry Redman to come up and talk to you.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks for the chance to have a talk today. Can I start by acknowledging all those that are out there harvesting, and hopefully the season will be a half reasonable one, given the challenges that there's been over the last number of years. Just from the Nationals' perspective, we took a couple of strong views to the last election. Firstly, we strongly support as much grain on rail as possible, and that's been our consistent position. We also supported having a look at the arrangements that have been in place, and supported a committee structure to do that. And I think that's been the stimulus behind Shane Love, who's here today as the member for Moore, that triggered the parliamentary committee that is currently reported back to Parliament on a whole range of issues. And there's a number of new things, new information there, even it's new information to ministers and members of Parliament. Now, government needs to respond to that, and I guess it's a chance for government to sort of rethink or reconsider its settings and positions around the whole Tier 3 to rail issue, in fact the whole rail issue in Western Australia. Transport infrastructure is really fundamental to the agriculture sector, and we've been pushing agriculture as a government very, very strongly, and in support of that, in the Seizing the Opportunity policy setting, there was $75 million that was put up to support infrastructure in all of regional Western Australia to support the supply chains for agriculture. And we've said that that could well be part of the solution for Tier 3. And one of the recommendations that's come through in the report is to approach the Minister for Regional Development for support as to whether the Royalties for Regions program can be something that supports the solution here. And the short answer to that is yes. The committee has put its report down. Government will consider that report. There will be a response there, and I'm making the point that that part of the solution here could come from the Royalties for Regions program that's there. Thank you very much, and I do wish you the very best for the rest of the harvest.